history of the Green gatherings goes back to way before the big Green gathering. Back in fact to 1980, when we'd had an election in 79 when Margaret Thatcher got in. And to me, the only interesting thing that happened in that election, or the most interesting thing, was that there was a new party that suddenly appeared called the Ecology Party, that no one had heard of before. It's now known as the Green Party, but it had 50 candidates in that election in 79 and had a TV broadcast for the first time, and nobody had heard of this thing before. And in fact, they only had 350 members at the time. And after the election, they had 3,500 members, because there were loads of people like me who had been trying to live ecological lifestyles and had been scared stiff about the doom impending the planet if we didn't change our ways and start living simply so that others can simply live, as some say. So we rushed to join this Ecology Party, and at the first conference that we went to, which was up in Manchester in 1980, one of my colleagues from Teepee Valley in Wales got up and proposed that they should have a summer gathering, so that all these people who were newly coming together and discovering that they all had the same ideas about sustainability and the need to build a sustainable society could meet other than in the very formal, stuffy, rigid setting of a formalised conference, and could actually meet out in fields and thrash out what we all thought a sustainable future ought to be, and what policies it ought to involve, and how we ought to organise changing society around completely so that we actually went down that road. And the following year it changed its name and it became the Green Gathering, and it was organised at the time by a kind of loose collective of basically self-elected, self-appointed people. And the first Ecology Party summer gathering and the first Green gatherings occurred on Worthy Farm, the Pilton site, Glastonbury Festival site, on the bottom fields now where they have the main market and the meeting point and all of that. And that went on for 3, I think there were altogether there at Pilton. And then the council told Michael Eavis, no, you can't have 2 events taking place on this site. And it had to move, and it went to Lambert's Hill Farm, which is just over the road from there, and had a gathering there in 83. So that must have been 80, 81, 82 were at Worthy Farm. 83 was at Lambert's Hill Farm, otherwise known as Teddy Stones. And then in 84 we had a Green gathering on the proposed cruise missile base at Molesworth in Cambridgeshire, which was going to be they'd already set up Greenham Common as a cruise missile base, and Molesworth was going to be the second one. And so we had a Green gathering there, and various of us stayed on afterwards all through the winter and became the Rainbow Village, which finally, the following February, was evicted by Michael Heseltine and 3,500 troops and police in the biggest army operation that there had been since the crossing of the Rhine in 1944, to evict 100 or so hippie protesters. But that kind of put the kibosh on Green gatherings as a kind of festival for a while, because by then it was 85, and later that year the people who'd been at Molesworth and been evicted and stayed on the road from there on, being a sort of flying column around Molesworth, being a nuisance, met up with other people on the road and became the convoy heading for Stonehenge and got bushwhacked at the Beanfield. I don't know what you're wiggling at me. You're not wiggling at me. That's all right then. And from that point on, you couldn't get festival sites. The only festival that survived was Glastonbury. And the scene as such went into smaller camps. You could run a smaller camp, 250, 500 people max, and get a site for it off a farmer and stay below the state radar kind of thing. And so we had little green gatherings in the late 80s. And then in 93, at which time I was coordinating the teepee field at Glastonbury Festival. Anne Waterhouse, who's sitting in the middle of the front row there, give him a wave, Anne. She was coordinating the green fields at Glastonbury Festival. And we actually got together for dinner afterwards, in, I think it was September sometime, with my partner Loppy, give us a wave, and Anne's partner Robin, and it turned out that both Anne and I had been going round at that Glastonbury Festival, seeing all our mates in the green fields, all the people who'd been involved in the original green gatherings in the early 80s, and saying to them, isn't it time that we started having our own big green gatherings again? And it was from that and from that dinner that the big green gathering was formed, by Anne and myself pooling our address books and sending out about 100 Romeo'd invitations to friends and contacts to come to a meeting in Bristol, hiring a room for an afternoon in Bristol, and saying, let's get it together, let's do it together. We'll all put in money for the first year, we'll all pay for our tickets in the first year, and anyone who pays before the middle of March can get to be a shareholder. We'll set up a company so that if the event goes bust, we don't go bust personally. And so that was how the big green gathering was born, and that went on for 16 years after that. The first year we had 1,600 people came, all paid 20 quid each ticket, whether they were working or whatever they were doing, and the costs were 33,000. So we went into the first winter with a deficit of 1,000 quid, but lots more people came on board and became shareholders, and it went from strength to strength. We had from 95 until 2000 at Lower Perkwood Farm in Wiltshire. Anne very sensibly retired after 2000, when we actually had a successful gathering that made a profit for the first time, paid our miserable level of back wages that we've been clocking up for 6 years. We moved into a whole new phase from 2002 onwards in Somerset, until we got to the point in 2009 where, as you all know, the big green gathering got closed down by the machinations of Avon and Somerset Police. What we didn't know then but do know now is that the transport coordinator of our main on-site bar, the Last Chance Saloon, was actually the undercover policeman Mark Kennedy /Stone, who was working with the Sumac group, who were running that bar in order to raise funds to fund direct action against climate change, the climate change camps and so on. The big green gathering, as well as being a meeting place for lots of radical concerned people, was also through that bar raising funds for direct action against climate change. And Mark Kennedy Stone was the transport manager for that bar, providing tranny vans that he say got from his uncle, presumably his Uncle Bill, and was reporting every half hour to the Association of Chief Police Officers, who we presume were then passing information to the Chief Constable of Avon and Somerset, which somehow persuaded him to close the event down. And he pulled out all the stops and put on all the pressure to make us crack somewhere in our organisation so they'd have an excuse to close us down. So that's left the Big Green Gathering with a huge amount of debt to people who bought tickets for it and found the festival closed down at the last minute. And so the Big Green Gathering company is kind of crippled by that at the moment, but still exists. And the important thing to me about the Big Green Gathering company was that in a unique way amongst all the companies that have ever put on festivals, it's democratically controlled and owned by the people who form part of that festival, because it's always been my belief that the festival is not the organisation, it's not whoever puts money behind it, it's not whoever thinks they're the bosses of it, it's actually the people who make the festival, every festival. It's you people and what you bring that actually makes the festival. And we're in intermittent conversations with lawyers who are agreeing to work for us for free in their spare time when they can fit it in, to try and amass all the evidence that we've got to be able to hopefully take some kind of court action against Avon and Somerset Police or Mendip District Council for closing that down. But to me the really heartening thing is to come here and see that other people who have picked up the baton, that's Shane and Muggsy and Steve Judd, the other people who've been involved, and Linda, people who were involved in the previous Big Green Gatherings, have now picked up the baton to run with it against really adverse circumstances, set up a new company, and got this event together where, as I read it from the atmosphere, everyone is really thrilled and pleased to be here, and really thrilled and pleased that Green Gatherings are back. Yeah? So on that, I did want to thank some other people as well, because there's other people there who ought to take a bow. Sam Hermitage, who's sitting next to Loppy there, is the man. He's the man who insisted from the beginning with the Big Green Gathering that we did it without using any generators, without using any mains power, and that's what's made the Big Green Gathering so distinctive and such a pace setter in the greening of festivals, because there's nothing less green than going into a festival and listening to generators going thump, thump, thump all day. It was Sam's brainwave that set us on that course, even though just getting one venue to do that back in '94 was a hell of a job. And we actually ended up with two, because we had a bicycle powered one as well. We had one wind and solar and one bicycle.